I think it's sort of skewed and unfavors the people who just want to make those extra few dollars. So I believe that we should maybe, if there is a possibility, maybe involve the people, the stakeholders, the people that this ordinance is going to regulate, sort of, and to bring them in and have a discussion with them. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, 1809 Dancing Oaks Court. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next person to sign up, I think Corey Stark.
If you'll say your name and address for the record.
Turtle Drive, 3137. Oh, okay. Paul Strang,
Paul Strang, 3239 Lake Park Avenue. Lake Park Road. My advisor. Good evening, council, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to speak on this short-term or STR, what you call. So, you know, as cities and communities grow, it creates demand. And there are times when young entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs step up and risk their own to meet that demand. And then often we see city governments want to get involved and regulate those demands. And so typically when ordinance get passed or are considered, it's because there is a problem or a perceived problem. My question is that is there a perceived problem? Is it just this trash and extra cars? Is that the problem, or is that the perceived problem? Because it seems a little bit overreach to actually charge these kind of funds and then have a, you know, hotel tax when these typically aren't hotels at all. You know, like the gentleman stated before, this is just a way to create extra revenue. Growth isn't bad, you know, but if there's going to be a constant, you know, government demand to charge for that, then it surely takes the incentive out of being an entrepreneur in this town. And so I want it to be considered that, by the way, can I ask the question, was there a lot of complaints about this, or is this all this regulation based on what they consider to be extra trash or parking? Because when you're actually in the short-term rental business, you have to be marketable. You know, that's what, you know, it has to be marketable. So if your place isn't marketable, if it is in disarray, who's going to want to stay there to begin with? So I would actually argue the point that some of these short-term rentals on these streets are in better shape than a lot of the houses on these streets. So that's exactly what I wanted to, you know, purvey when I came up here. When I was reading over, I didn't have a chance to read all the, you know, demands, but reading them here and seeing them, what my question, are we allowed to ask questions?
Well, sir, it's a public hearing process, so we prefer to, you know, this is the process is designed to hear what you have to say. And then after the public hearing is over, we would allow the mayor the option to take questions.
So is the ordinance being in place because there was multiple complaints about what is going on? Mr. Mayor, you said that this is a problem nationwide. I haven't read any of this, that this is a problem. Well, where does that come from, that this is a problem nationwide?
Well, just this is a public hearing for us to hear, and then we'll talk, and we're taking notes of things that you guys bring up. So
I'll address that when we get through with the public hearing.
So I guess I would say that, you know, the more regulation that we put on demand, you know, it really disincentive, you know, gives a disincentive for young entrepreneurs or, you know, small business to really want to participate in that.
Thank you, Mr. Strang. Catherine and Tanner Hicks.
Tanner Hicks, 114 East 10th Avenue, Belton, Texas. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak in this public hearing. My wife and I opened up an Airbnb. We lived in it for about 3 years in downtown, right across from UMHB. Just that we got a letter in the mail for this, and so we came because, you know, this is something that's important to us. Most of the time, these Airbnbs, if you look on Airbnb or short-term rental or whatever, VRBO, they're the nicest house in the block. They are the most maintained. In my street, we are the nicest house and the most maintained. I'm there twice a week. I clean the place. I mow the yard. I maintain it. Like the last gentleman said, it has to be marketable. I mean, it has to look nice, and they kind of like filter out themselves. If it's not nice, no one's going to stay there. If you don't get 5 stars, no one will stay at your place. If you have 4 stars, no one's going to stay at your place. So it has to be perfect. And I try to make sure that it's perfect. And the people who stay at our house are quiet. They're coming to UMHB to visit family or drop their kids off. They're a nurse working at the hospital, and they're never home. They're at work all the time. Their families visiting people for Christmas, or the people going to the expo center, you know, for stuff that's there. We've had probably 50 people stay at our place, 50 groups in the past since May 2022. So not even a full year, 50 groups. They've all been very quiet and respectful. Not one complaint. And I'm, like I said, we lived there for 3 years. So I know all my neighbors, and I've said, you know, every one of them, if you have a problem, anything, any concern, you see something weird going in there, or something strange happening, please call me. Not one thing, not one problem at all. And like I said, I'm over there twice a week. So most of the time I'm in the yard mowing the grass or something, and my neighbor Jim's talking to me. And I mean, we're very involved in the whole process. So the last thing I just want to say is, like, you know, I think we did things the right way. We got a company that does all of our taxes. So we pay the state taxes, the county taxes, the city taxes, and that's 15% of everything we make goes to that. So this $1,000 registration thing is just like, we're barely getting by. Like, Belton's not a big desirable place for people to come. So we're not really, it's not like Austin. You're not making $5,000 a month. I'm not. So it's just, man, another ding on it. It's like, we're barely going to make enough to pay for everything. But whenever all that's done, we have to pay income taxes, and then we have to pay property taxes. And it's just like, I'm going to have to go long-term rental, but the house isn't set up for that. So anyways, but I just want to also say that we raise the property value in the neighborhood, and we pay the taxes. We know our neighbors, and we're involved. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Amanda Langen.
Hi, I am Amanda Langen, and I live at 400 East 22nd Avenue in Belton. My husband and I, both disabled veterans using our VA benefits, purchased our home in Belton in 2018. Our home is our primary residence. I'm here today to advocate for short-term rentals and the need to recognize that there is a difference between owner-occupied STRs versus home purchase solely for STRs. Over the last few years, we have suffered financially due to COVID. My state-listed home childcare was closed down. We have also been impacted by the rise in property taxes. Within 5 years, our mortgage has increased by almost $1,000 a month, making it difficult on a fixed income to continue to stay in and maintain the property. As a way to offset expenses, we decided to rent out a room using Airbnb. To our surprise, within 6 months, we were able to catch up financially. As a courtesy, we contacted our immediate neighbors and informed them of the rental and asked them to please inform us of any concerns. Our neighbors were very supportive and stayed in contact with us. Examples of my guests include a gentleman who was in town for his 50th high school reunion, a local mother who needed a place to stay for herself and her 2 kids, a San Antonio family that traveled to attend a concert held at the expo, and itinerant workers contracted to do work in the area. My last guest stayed here with us for work reasons for 3 months. She booked weekly as her company was paying her per diem, and she could not find affordable accommodations for that lengthy time frame and going week by week. We have had some wonderful guests, have made new friends, and received nothing but 5-star reviews, but has earned us the status as super hosts. Our home is a shared home, not a hotel. We list the room on Airbnb because they take care of the state occupancy taxes, provide guest verification, and the insurance that is needed. We believe that STRs are vital for Belton's continued economic growth and recognize the need for ordinance. However, there is a difference in the types of STRs, and that needs to be addressed, especially given the concerns regarding limited homes available for purchase. Other cities within Texas have identified two primary types of STRs and have aligned the ordinances accordingly. Type 1 defined as owner occupied and type 2 defined as a vacation rental. I asked that the city of Belton please take into consideration those of us type 1 who are merely just trying to maintain our own homes and not add more financial difficulty when establishing any ordinances. And I do have a question that you absolutely can address later. My question is, how do you plan on accurately determining exact locations of STRs? And how do you plan on enforcing this ordinance?
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I have to stop.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your coming. Mr. Eric Seidel.
Seven five 35 Sparta Road, Belton, Texas. I grew up in Temple. I'm a UHB alumni. We got our first home when we got married and rented out as an Airbnb just to, get by. And we have another business in Belton, a wedding venue, and it helps us maintain the home and provide housing for friends and family that come for Christmas. When people need it, like people from church. Actually, we had Troy stay when he was out of a home for a month. I just don't think some of these rules or regulations are fair. Being said, I went to UHB. Some of the long-term rentals, how are they not going to be? It's rhetorical. Held to these same standards. I mean, those places are, for lack of a better word, some of them are shittles. I mean, I apologize, but the houses were right off the foundation, falling down around them, and they were being rented out, and no regulation there. It blows my mind how honest, hardworking people are being hit, and slumlords are getting away with it. I mean, we can barely uphold code as it is. I just don't think it's fair.
Thank you.
Apologize for profanity.
Thank you.
Oh.
Amy Weir.
Hi, I'm Amy Ware. Do you want my residential address or do you want the property address? Okay, 6141 Franklin Road, Moody. Okay. Hi, I'm a property manager. I've been managing several different Airbnbs in Bell County for probably about 5 years. And however, there are a lot of the aspects that y'all have touched on we're already doing. We do provide smoke detectors, fire extinguishers. There is emergency contact information that is provided. But I will say the 1 hour, that's a little much. Okay. If it's an emergency, there's 911. 24 hours. Okay. Basically most of the time I get, if I don't see it within the first hour or two, it may be 3 hours tops. And then I contact them back. And, but I do always make sure that they get checked in. And once they are okay, then they go on about their business. And unless I am needed. Another thing, when as minute as a problem as it seems, when I first started out, I had a trash and a recycling set out. Well, I seen that they were putting all kinds of trash in the recycling and I was having to dumpster dive. That was not fun. So we got rid of the recycling bin and we have 2 trash cans, and that seems to work out fine for that particular property. And also the annual fee. That's a lot. These, as I stated before, these homes are not bringing in a lot of money. They're just barely floating and making it by. So I am able to look at the books. I'm seeing what's going in. That extra $1,000 that's gonna be a huge hit. It really is. And I would like to see maybe like a secondary meeting pulling more of the homeowners and the staff that works in to get a better idea of where we can kind of come to terms and meet in the middle. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Crane.
Paul Crane, 1313 Live Oak Drive, Belton, of course. Good evening, city, mayor, Sam, Judy, Cynthia, everybody. Hi. Just wanted to come and tell you guys, I think the same thing all of us agree on is how much I love Belton. This is a great town. What I want is Imagine Belton. I'm honored to be on the advisory committee for the city. And just as Texas right now is competing and currently winning against other states, Belton is currently competing with neighboring cities in regards to pulling individuals into the town. And most importantly, so that we can achieve Imagine Belton, investments into town. The investment dollars in the past, as have I, over the past 2 years, done 16 flips on properties. That's not currently possible given the macro environment, the interest rate increase, the PGs that are being put on people in regards to borrowing any type of money over a certain amount. So where do we get that from? I think where we get it from is short-term rentals. And I think it's a great avenue for us to all grow together, honestly. Larger cities have enacted a lot of these taxes. And the reason they've enacted those taxes is because they're on a totally different growth cycle than Belton, in a totally different place, growth cycle wise, than Belton is. They want to decrease inventory and maintain some of those lower income housing. That's not what Belton wants based on what I've seen. What we want is we want those investment dollars coming in so that we can, increase the growth in the city and the value of the property around the city. Before enacting anything, I would say we need to get developers and investors to the table and have a broader discussion about all of this. In regards to permits and in regards to code, I think we are all on the same page. I don't think any of us want any cars being parked out in front or somebody not to be able to drive down the street. I have a brand new Airbnb at 419 Northeast Street. Y'all are all welcome to come there and walk around. Would love to show you. Right next door, there's a long-term rental with 15 cars. When the plumbing was being redone, which by the way, thank you very much for that. That was wonderful. Those cars, I think held up that process for a good 4 hours because all those long-term rentals are stacked on top of each other right next door. Another Airbnb was 128 East 12th.
15 seconds, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crane. I appreciate it. Appreciate your comments about the city. As I said at the outset, we've had, and Mr. Strang pointed that out, we've had multiple comments from folks on both sides. Most of those folks who are not in favor are not necessarily here tonight, but we want to hear all these things before we come up with the final decision. So at this time, I will close the public hearing and open it up for council discussions.
You can come.
Come on. Come on up. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You all were suffering with the babies and now
No,
you
no.
realize.
No suffering,
Sorry,
joy.
Hopefully anybody with a kid can cut me some slack today.
Yes, ma'am. No problem.
So Dominica Garza, 3012 Mystic Mountain. And I am not a short-term rental owner, but I do support an attractive ordinance for short-term rentals. I'm originally from San Antonio, most recently a resident of Austin. So I tell my friends all the time, family all the time, come visit us, come visit us, come see, there's this, there's that. And I'll tell you a quick story because I'm timed. In-laws coming, help watch the kids. Expo Center's booked, La Quinta's booked, as they usually are because of the overflow for the events. And this was about 3 years ago. They don't know the area. They stayed at the Budget Inn. They didn't know the Budget Inn too well, and they were woken up at 3 a.m. with an officer serving a warrant next door. It wasn't the best first impression of Belton. So when I read this ordinance, and when I read that it came from 3 complaints that were typically trash and noise and parking, I felt the ordinance was overreaching if those were really the only complaints that we received. And actually, if those are the complaints we received, I think we're doing pretty well. I think an ordinance is helpful. I think the ordinance that is proposed is overbearing, especially hearing from the owners and speaking about the taxes. That gave me a headache alone right there. The taxes, there are safety requirements I know that are important, but it seemed very far for these that are really, especially in a room of their bedroom that they're trying to supplement for income. But also, if we're trying to attract visitors to the community, we have to recognize that we have very limited quality lodging accommodations. So if nothing else, I did have one big issue with the ordinance, which is the 500 feet from an existing short-term rental. That makes it very unequitable for the community. And it basically means once you've planted your flag, you're as good as gold, and sorry neighbor and sorry neighbor. I did notice that the complaints came from residential neighborhoods. And so I also wonder what role an HOA can serve in making their own stipulations for their own residential zoning. But as far as the 500 feet separation, I would ask if there could be an exemption for the central business district, at least, or in the downtown district, where the makeup is quite different, especially in regards of parking. But in general, I think an ordinance is helpful, but I do think a committee of property owners would be helpful to form this. What I noticed in the committee that put this together, which it's hard starting from scratch and it feels like everything was really thrown in to the greatest degree. I think a partnership with owners of other properties. The stories that I heard tonight opened my eyes. And so I think that a better partnership might be able to shape an ordinance that is favorable for all of us. I think that's it. Do I still have time? I'm looking at my notes, make sure I didn't forget anything. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Garza. Appreciate your time. Now we'll close the public hearing and open it up for council discussion.
Yes, I have a question. In the ordinance, Mr. Van Til, have we made a distinction between owner occupied short terms and non-owner occupied, meaning when the owner lives there and is renting space or a room versus he doesn't live there and he's renting it?
No, sir, we
No,
did
we
not.
haven't.
That's part of the definition. Am I correct?
You're correct. And I think that's something that should be considered.
Yeah, we discussed it. We saw it in other ordinances. but
And you think what?
I think that should be considered.
Yeah,
Being on the committee, I definitely didn't feel there was a right way or a wrong way through that process. This is very, you read about other cities, you read about other small towns. I think when our committee first met, we had just received a presentation on the lack of affordable housing in Bell County as a whole. And so if you have a community dominated by short-term rental properties where people can't purchase an affordable home, I think that was kind of a concern that kind of drove some of the stuff. But I wouldn't say that the ordinance presented from personally is one that was going to be final. I mean, we were looking at so many different ordinances, so much different research, and trying to pick and pull what we felt was good for our community. Nothing set in stone. I texted Sam and May earlier that I don't feel it's ready for voting approval today, one way or the other.
right.
And I think some people made some good comments and, just to answer some of those questions. Some of those that I wrote down, complaints are consistent. Those are just the ones that kind of spurred the process. I think that's something to mention. I do agree with the 2 types of STRs. I remember bringing that up and it wasn't included at the time. Somebody said Belton's not an attractive place, or desirable place. So I wonder why so many STRs then, but I mean, we can debate that on a different timeline, but I just want to say I appreciate everybody that came and spoke. It's helpful getting opinion. Some of those that didn't speak, you're probably here to listen and form an opinion. And if there's some way, you can always email that to Bob and those for future discussion. But I just want to say thanks for coming.
If I could make a few comments, having served on the committee as well. First, thank you all so much for coming. I think we will want to have a group meet to discuss with owners now that we know who you are. Thank you for coming out. That was one issue we had. We didn't know who was in our community. I think I have 5 things that are really important to me. I've been in the tourism business for a long time. But the primary residence versus the investor-owned properties, I think that's a very important topic. We need to discuss as a community. The hot taxes are that's a tax. That's not something that we get to make up or choose not to pay. That's a tax you collect from your customer. And so I believe that that's a non-negotiable. I think it's important to restrict density in some form or fashion in residential areas. And I think it's really important. And that's one thing that we didn't do. And we discussed at our last meeting was looking at other areas as this last speaker referenced. I think we do need to look at some of our other districts where we might increase the opportunity for those in our central business district or in UMHB, things that make sense. And then just look at, again, taking your words, an attractive ordinance piece where we can restrict density within residential neighborhoods. I think that's really important. That doesn't mean restricting it completely, but looking at how we control density and so that we can preserve residential supply and then support tourism. I think that all of our STR owners want residents in their homes. We have a tourism CVB department here. We want to know about them. We want to be able to help promote them, especially when we are working with events that maybe not everyone is aware of. We have communication and a relationship that was built, mentioned several times this evening, so we can work together and help you as well. And so I certainly think the fee needs to be discussed. I was in those meetings and I think we need to look at that. And and someone also mentioned, we didn't necessarily start from scratch. This is something that we looked at large cities in Texas, small cities in Texas, just looking at something that might work for Belton. So this has been a great start. The feedback tonight, I think, has been tremendous. And I think we should hold some sort of workshop where we can meet with our community members and come to an attractive ordinance.
So first, thank you guys for being here. This is the way government should work. People getting together to discuss the options. There's going to be pros and cons. There's a tension always between my rights, your rights, or theirs and those others. And so this does that. So thank you for doing that. Second is if you feel you need to reach out to any of us or the city, you can go straight to staff. You can also go to the webpage. You can get an email for each and every one of us. If you need to send us an email, if you have a question, please do that. Will you respond to the email? This is our turn. You had your turn. Asking a question.
Thank you.
This is not public comment right now.
Yeah. So generally, yes, we will respond. And so we're all taxpayers. We all do things. I just specifically, I own land. I have rentals. I've got to pay for my bills. I've got to pay my taxes. We're not employed by the city. We're all tax-paying citizens, just like you guys. And so what you guys have brought up, some of it is new perspective that we didn't necessarily think of. Some of these things we agree with you. And I know that if different rentals that I had, if I had to pay $1,000 every year to own that, that would push me from black to red. And so that's a real deal. And so we need to look at that. A comment was made about entrepreneurship. The challenge that we have with innovation, which these short-term rentals are available now because the innovation of apps that you can now list, and that's great. But many times innovation starts, and then what do? How do we catch up with that? So government regulation or science or textbooks are written after somebody invents something, not before. And so the entrepreneur that that wants to own a hotel but can't pay the bills because they're subject to taxes that other people that rent property aren't. Well, that's unfair to the person who wants to open a hotel. A young family wanting to come into an area or move out to Marfa, but they can't afford the house because the houses are all rented and dominated by investors, not by locals. Downtown Paris, downtown Boston, downtown New York. You have communities that are disappearing because it's more cost effective for the owner to rent it out than to live there and have young families. So we've got to balance that. So understand we need to balance that. So to that point, I think it's already been brought up.
3 minutes are up.
No, sir. No, sir. I get paid $1 a year for this job. And
Mr. Finley, I'm
She-
going to ask you to leave if you have any more outbursts, sir. You're most welcome.
Problem is they're not getting any.
Thank you.
That's the problem with the SCR. They're not getting any of the money.
No, it has nothing to do with the money.
Sure it does.
We won't get any
So-
anyway.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. That's unrelated issue. But ultimately, I think we do need to look at the things that have been brought up. I think it's not quite ready for prime time. One thing I learned, I'm not a very good writer being an engineer, but they said the key to writing a good thing, novel or dissertation or thesis, is write it once and edit it 1,000 times, right? So we're writing it once. It's not perfect. We will edit it, maybe not 1,000 times, but we will get a lot closer before we publish this. So it's still in the process. We have not made up our minds. This is a community event. If we just say no regulations, people are upset. If we say too many regulations, people are upset. So we're going to find where we can hopefully get a middle.
It's a good point, David. I appreciate it. Craig?
No, I'm in agreement. This isn't ready for prime time. Is a motion to table to a specific time appropriate or something else?
Can we motion to kick it back to committee?
Yeah.
Is that what you need?
So moved.
Yeah.
I move that we postpone until the issues are resolved and we'll bring it back when it's ready for prime time.
I think it's important to take it back to the committee. Committee's done a lot of work up to this point, and they might be the sounding board for this next step in the discussion. I think it'd be very valuable.
Because we have our audience here, we will set up a time to have a workshop meeting with those interested that would like to come,
Sure. Be a great idea.
STR owners.
And ultimately, it may require either an extension of an existing commission, whether it's planning and zoning or something else, or maybe a new commission to look at these things to make sure that we have citizen input as it goes forward. Because this is a thing that's not going away because of the demand, but we just don't have the capacity.
I second the motion. We have a motion and a second to postpone this. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. As I said at the outset, that last line that Mr. Van Til had up there was a matter for discussion, and I do appreciate Stephanie and Daniel and the other folks who are on the committee because they did do a lot of research. As I said at the outset, different cities are having different levels of problems, and we have had contact. We would love to make everyone happy, but we realize that any kind of ordinance like this is going to not meet everyone's requirement. But we will listen. We'll meet as long as we need to meet to try to come to a consensus and then move forward at that point in time. But thank everybody for coming. I appreciate your time. As I think David said, this is the way government's supposed to work. We need to hear from folks before we make a final decision. And we've heard from a lot of folks tonight. And I've heard from other folks privately and via email and other things. And so we appreciate all the input. So
Before the mass exodus, to add on to Stephanie's comments, I don't know the logistics of, obviously we can't have a committee of 1,000 people. That's not really a committee. That would just be a hoop and hollering fest. But I think at least names on the list, those that spoke, I think, stakeholders, even those that are against STRs, I think giving them a voice in that meeting as well, I think is important. So I just want to make sure that we're not forgetting because I think we said investors and owners and shareholders, and just want to make sure we're not forgetting the other side, because there are a lot more residential residents who are not STR owners, and that's also a stakeholder. So
I think it would be, and I'm not to prolong this discussion, but it would also be helpful to maybe gather comments that we've heard from those folks so that we have an idea. I mean, we certainly know traffic and trash and boats and things like that, but it would be helpful, Wayne, if you've heard those things, and we can discuss this further outside as we prepare for the workshop. So we have an understanding.
We do. Again, thank y'all for coming. Come back sometime.
Anytime.
Item number 10, to consider authorizing the city manager entering into a professional services agreement with Lee Engineering related to the South Main Street Transportation Study. Mr. Van Til.
Mayor, thank you very much. Oh, here we go. As you mentioned, this is an item to consider authorizing the city manager enter into professional services agreement with Lee Engineering relating to a study for South Main Street. With us, we have online is Kelly Parma. He is with Lee Engineering, and he helped us to prepare the proposal. So if you have any questions of any really technical questions, Kelly is here to help us answer those questions. And so the purpose of the study is to evaluate and recommend strategies to address traffic congestion and facilitate traffic flow while preserving the objectives identified in the Imagine Belton marketing plan. There are some identified reasons for embarking upon this study. And here's a quick list of them. It's to address congestion, again, to make sure that we articulate with the Imagine Belton plan, the future plans for East 6th Street, West 2nd Avenue or FM 93, future plans that may be out there for UMHB, and then to prepare for a call for projects with the MPO. So just to drill down on some of these topics, in terms of congestion mitigation, we are a growing community, and that growth, I guess, manifests itself on our South Main corridor, and a lot of folks take Main Street to get from one end of town to the other. And that's evident, just very recently we had a meeting on Thursday. Our members got to the meeting late, whether they started late or started on time. Their excuse was we got stuck in traffic. So we are going to accept that excuse, whatever it's worth. Talk a little bit more about the Imagine Belton plan, but the vision there, the plan envisions a very walkable environment that's very conducive to small business growth, things like that. Other contributors that add to congestion on South Main are accidents on Interstate 14 and 35. And we've all experienced it for years and years and years. And these are big issues that are probably beyond the scope of this study, but staff has spoken with the council on numerous times about efforts in conversations with FHWA or TxDOT or whomever it is to find a geometry or a design for the intersection that is less hazardous. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. And of course, everyday traffic that hits South Main is growing and growing, just like we talked about at the growing population. It's a very busy thoroughfare. And then we often see some challenges with public safety vehicles getting through the area, getting out of downtown, getting to north, south, east, and west, things like that. So those are very key things. Just the dynamics of South Main seems to be lagging behind what's growing in our community. And so our town is growing and changing and getting better every day, and Main Street can't grow with it. It's not an organic thing, so we're kind of stuck with that reality. So just to drill down on the South Belton plan, particularly in the South Main area, and this is, as you can see there, is identified to be a pedestrian-friendly, activity-focused to improve the vehicle and pedestrian experience, to have a streetscaping that is very attractive and very functional as well. But there are also some challenges, and the primary challenge is the right-of-way that is in there. So this study will complement the implementation of this plan. And as you can see, we have one effort underway already, and that is in addition to the work that the EDC is doing in the city with all the investments and discussions, all the things that are happening beyond this. This is more of a, down to the technical aspects of it. We engaged Covey, who also did the plan, to do design criteria and to come up with development regulations. And we're proposing at this point also that we engage Lee in order to do the study and make recommendations on improvements for South Main. That'll complement the plan that was adopted here recently. So this is just a graphic of what was in the plan. As you can see, it looks different than what it is out there in reality. And so we want to be part of the answer or the question that says, how do we accomplish this? And, something that we can get to that meets that objective and still addresses everything up and downstream from this location. So the other aspect is the future, East 6th Street. From Main to 35. And y'all know that you have discussed redevelopment plans for a number of years in a similar context to maybe the Central Avenue appearance. And so that's kind of where we're headed for. So we hope that as these efforts kick off, we articulate this traffic study with those improvements. Now, also, I have to mention that Matt has finished some improvements along East 6 from Waco to the highway, which is primarily waterline, big deal. I mean, y'all know this, and sections of the sidewalk that's been replaced. And then also just the intersection of East 6 and South Main. What is going to happen there? We don't know. And so we want to be part of the evolution of what happens at that intersection. We also think it's important that we keep in mind that we do have some funding set aside for sidewalks on East 6 as part of that redevelopment process. And currently that letting schedule is set up for 2026. So our study will reach up to about that time frame. And so we will have an opportunity to evaluate what that project will look like and what it will do for the overall project as well. And then on a short-term basis, we've talked with TxDOT about, the possibility of even doing just a simple overlay on the road, just to smooth it out, to make it look better, to enhance the striping and things like that. East 6 is a big player in the study. West 2nd Street, TxDOT has hired a designer to begin the design of this thoroughfare. And so we need to stay up with those guys, see what they are planning to do. And so we've had some conversations with TxDOT, so that we can keep the lines of communication open between the two organizations. And so some of the thinking that that I've written down here, very, very early, South Main to Sparks, maybe a 2-lane divided with a decel at South Main. Again, we're impacting South Main, that intersection. Sparks on out, maybe 4 lanes divided. We're talking about sidewalks and shared use paths and things like that. This is a major project, as you all know. And so we want to make sure that that South Main is a beneficiary of those improvements rather than having it stop there or just kind of taper off to the east, things like that. And so, as I mentioned here, the key issue is the intersection of South Main and 2nd. That's really kind of the surface, but when you look at the dynamics beyond those, beyond that intersection, there are other intersections that may be affected as well. For instance, Penelope, stuff like that. So the next item I wanted to highlight is again about UMHB. Now, we don't know what the plans are. We haven't had any formal reaction on what they plan on doing. As you come down East 6, you all know this is a major entry point into the community. And so our discussions have been, we want to make sure that we are part of that conversation about what that may look like, how that may function and things like that. Because as you know, lots of traffic going north, south, east, west, all those kind of things. So we want to make sure that we're at the table to talk to the university and make sure we understand each other and complement each other. And then, of course, early communication is key. So we just want to maximize our cooperation and come up with some mutually agreeable outcomes. I think that's a natural
Bob,
reason for doing
I'm sorry, to
this.
interrupt. Could I ask a really, really quick question?
Certainly.
In this study, when we define South Main, at what point are we describing it as South Main?
Yeah.
Geographically, have we made that decision?
sir.
I mean, is it at East or is it at 13th or where do we begin South Main in this discussion?
That's a great question. We'll go from 35 up to 13th. That's the
13th. Thank you.
limitations.
South of Central. Period. North
Yeah.
of Central.
It's central Main
That
and
was
south,
my- that
south
was
and
my-
central.
That was my question. So we're talking about 13th South. Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
for-
That's
For the
correct.
purpose of this project,
Yes, sir.
for this study. Yep.
Yeah. I just
Just
wanted to
shy of
share
Oklahoma.
with you- Sorry. I'm sorry.
Just shy of it.
It's shy of Oklahoma. Well, it's not too bad, I don't think.
And we have
Um,
funding set aside for this study to be conducted, correct?
Yes, sir, we do. Yes, sir, we do.
Any other questions for Mr. Van Til?
Okay.
Just a statement. It's an obvious statement. It's kind of sad that the local government and citizens need to pay for primarily the impact of Interstate 35, 14, State Highway 317.
And
Those
93.
are all not local. So, and hopefully this study will help prompt some of our senior legislative friends to help us. So.
Well
Yes.
said.
Yes, that is true. Many times things don't get taken care of unless the local government steps forward and takes care of it. And this is a perfect example of that.
Absolutely true.
Amen.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah,
Comments?
I had a question regarding that is, so we're doing TxDOT's work up front. Is there any chance of recuperation of
Well, if they
those
fix
funds?
the
if-
problem,
if-
it's money well spent.
Yeah, if they address the problem and under that process, is there a process? of
We consider it an
reimbursement?
investment in the future. We've had discussion with TxDOT about it. They recognize the problem. We've encouraged them to come and drive it, all times of the day. You should just be in the evenings, but it's really all times of the day, and night now. And so, we've suggested we would do the study, but we will be coming back with recommendations for improvements. And they said they would go arm in arm with us to K-Tempo to help fund recommendations that come out of this project. So as was mentioned, I think it'll be money well spent to get this in place and be ready to go in the next call for projects at K-Tempo.
And have we briefed UMHB on our study plans?
Not yet. We certainly had a lot of discussion with them during the Covey plan. We met several times and that'll be certainly very early contact that this is coming.
Other questions or comments?
No, I'm sorry.
No, I was
For
just
me.
gonna offer to, I would make a motion that we authorize the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Lee Engineering to help fix our South Main, Central Main problems.
Second. Have a motion and multiple seconds, and all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I hear none. Motion passes unanimously. At this time, we're going to
Thank you.
adjourn into executive session, but again, I want to appreciate everyone who came. Now we have varied viewpoints, and we will meet again and talk about it and try to work through some of the issues, but thank you all for coming.
Thank you for your input.